Your experienced staff are spending hours repeating training they already know. With knowledge verification in Ausmed Learn, mandatory training just changed forever. Enable and configure smarter mandatory training in minutes. Staff are assigned to complete a short assessment. Those whose knowledge is verified, they're done, compliant for another year. Those with gaps proceed to the training module to refresh their knowledge. It's time to get a genuine insight into where your workforce knowledge sits, so that you can spend your staff's time more wisely. The result? A culture of capability building and hours of care back where they belong.
Hello, and welcome to our first Ausmed webinar of 2026, a very, very special one. We are launching knowledge verification in Ausmed Learn. I'll just begin by also acknowledging the Wurundjeri Wurrung people, the traditional custodians on the lands of which we're joining from today, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. It's great to be back. My name is Zoe Youl. I'm Head of Learning and Capability at Ausmed, and I have the pleasure of having Ben Quartermaine, our Product Manager for the Learning and Growth team, with us today. We are really excited to launch a new product that we're very excited by, that we've had lots of people ask for, talk about, and want to sign up for. So it's our pleasure to join you today. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. You'll see a chat. Really encourage you, ask questions. We'll have some Q&A time at the end, but always great, and we'll do our best during the webinar to answer some of those questions. The recording will be sent out following today with an email, and we did, I think initially say it was around about 30 minutes. That's my fault. When we put the slides together, it's definitely sitting around 45 minutes. So we'll try and cover as much as we can up top, and hopefully we can have you stick with us for the duration, but did just want to flag that. So what we're going to be covering today, our agenda, are these 5 key areas. So we want to share with you, why did we develop knowledge verification? What is it? How we built it? How it works, of course, and we've got a live demo that Ben is going to do for that section. And of course, a little bit about next steps, how you can get access to it and allow some time for questions. But there's quite a bit to cover. Let's jump straight into it. So for those of you that are joining us that work in aged care, I think you can really clearly empathise that the strengthened aged care quality standards and the reform agenda that went with it really, and this is going back to the Royal Commission and the new Aged Care Act, of course, drove such a huge need for training and education. It wasn't just the quantity of learning, but the quality too. And I think it really has raised the bar on what trained actually means, what good looks like, and it's forced a lot of change within our businesses. Many of you, as we have over the past 2 or 3 years, have worked through the training requirements that stem from the updated standards. We're now, needing to provide training on the new standards, as well as then respond to all of the requirements that sit within the new standards. For many of you that joined us for some of our webinar series last year, Standard 5 alone had about 75 specific implicit training requirements, and in the audit guidance that was released, there was about 60 specific evidence items that can be requested under the new model that related just to training and education. So it's very clear that reform drives training surges. Now, this is just one example I've shared from aged care. We've got the next edition of the NSQHS standards due sometime this year. We expect when we review those comprehensively, it will demonstrate more need for training. And of course, the NDIS is undergoing a raft of reforms. And in these situations, it is appropriate. Training is an appropriate vehicle that can help get those regulatory changes and the reform changes into practice. But what happens? what happens as a result of that? You can see on the graph here that training hours and mandatory module assignments increase significantly. So we get training hours increasing, learning seat time increasing, and of course increasing. So under this situation, which we can fully expect and predict, that huge reform, that huge change agenda really drives those increases in training. And as I said, we feel that that is appropriate, but this is a huge impact to the business. So is more training always the answer? And should it be sustained at this pace? And I would contend, even in my position as head of learning and capability at Ausmed, no, it's not appropriate for us to continue to deliver these training requirements at the pace that we've seen. This is the statistics that I'm drawing on that I've just shown you. So why? Well, there's 5 issues with this. First thing is that completion of training doesn't necessarily equal competence. So I'm going to unpack that shortly. But essentially, just because you did a module, does that mean that you actually can demonstrate that in practice? No. Second is that when we're having huge investments in training time for, largely compliance purposes, we're trying to stay compliant with those new standards. We rightly so obsess over completion rates, but I would argue that that's the wrong measure of success. We can't measure effectiveness. So even if we wanted to, we lack data on whether all this training that we're doing is actually working. We're not able to get data on knowledge transfer. We're not able to get data on intention or actual behavior change. So there's no real meaningful way, currently anyway, to answer the so what in all of this. Did the training actually make a difference, or did it change anything? Fourth thing I'd argue why we can't sustain the amount of training at that pace is because we can't target gaps. There's no room, there's no space, there's no time. And if we've really, delivered a raft of training, there may be a lack of will or desire to do that training where it matters. It's not personalized. It doesn't meet the learner or the staff member where they are. And we're not able to adapt to their new needs, which will emerge, or their desires. Let's take a performance conversation that should be linked to learning. If that schedule of learning is so packed with the basic compliance training, then there's very little space to offer that opportunity for more educational capability-based training. And on that, the 5th point, why I would say continuing to do training at the volume that we've done, particularly off the back of these standards, is that we will get training fatigue. I'm sure we've all experienced it. What does it look like? It is that disengagement. It's that staff are spending time completing modules that they already know. And as anyone that works in L&D, that I know we have many people on the webinar today, no one enters this world of education to say, I want to create a culture of poor learning. But that's what happens. If we're overdoing it, we're not creating a culture where there's a love of learning, where it's embraced. And I think that's one of the unintended consequences that come off the back of this. So a long time ago, I think it was almost 18 months, maybe even 2 years ago, we got together after hearing this, loud and clear from many of our customers, and said, what if there was a way for staff who already know it, they have the knowledge, they've retained it, they've remembered it, to be able to demonstrate it, to prove that they have existing knowledge? And what if we were able to avoid that repeat training and actually target to where the real gaps are? So if you know it, if you can retain it, if you can prove or demonstrate that, why do it again? So this is where knowledge verification comes in. And I want to really pause here and say, before we get stuck into what is it and how does it work, which we'll absolutely cover, that really this hasn't been plucked out of thin air. We heard those conversations loud and clear, but when we actually double clicked on the why, under this, there are some very, very clear and established educational frameworks that are the basis for verifying knowledge. And there's 3 key models. I'm going to just briefly walk you through these 3 key models, because we think it's really important for you not just to see on your computer screen what this new feature is, but to understand it, to really know this is the why, this is what's gone into our thinking, the many, many conversations that we've had as to why we think this is really needed and how we've built it. So 3 key models. We've got Benner's novice to expert. And these are my personal favorites. I know I'm absolutely biased, but I love them, and I'm going to explain how they really connect with knowledge verification. So you've got Benner, novice to expert, got Miller and the model of clinical competence, and the New World Kirkpatrick model. So let's start with Benner. Benner's model shows that we need to move a person from being a novice to an expert. It was created, I think, in the early 80s, originally for nursing, but it's widely used in workforce development, and most capability frameworks will base on it. What it shows is that training alone does not create capability, and that the real expertise comes from that accumulated experience over time. And our goal is to move people from novice to expert, but training alone is not going to get us to where we need to be. So just hold that for a moment. Second model, where does knowledge verification fit in? What are the educational underpinnings of it? So now we've got Miller's pyramid of clinical competence. And what this model shows is that on a journey from novice to expert, we need to move in a sequential order. We can't just know something and then do it. That would be lovely if we just knew and then did. What we need to do, and think of yourself, think of the last time you were able to do, apply, show in practice. We first build the knowledge and then build the skill and then connect it into practice. So I want you to really think that knowledge verification, it sits at that foundation, and it's an ability to verify knowledge before skill or practice is assessed. And the last model is Kirkpatrick, the New World Kirkpatrick model specifically. The original was the Kirkpatrick. This is a slightly revised, updated model. So there's 4 levels of training and evaluation. Level 1 is the bottom. Did they complete it? Was it relevant? Level 2 is, did they actually learn anything? Level 3 is behavior, and that asks when we evaluate level 3, are they applying it? And level 4, impact, arguably the most important. Did it make a difference? Now, think of your own organization and how you're currently evaluating your training and education plan. Most organizations will probably sit and measure at level 1 only, and that's completions. And most compliance data just sits there. What was it completed? Cool. If it is, great. We're good. Compliant. Where knowledge verification moves you is at least bring it up to level 2. Now, it's my goal here at Ausmed to get as high a level evaluation as possible. It was what my master's focused on, but this is a great start. At least with knowledge verification, we can get better quality, objective evidence of the impact of that learning. So if we pull those 3 models together, it really is evident that there's a really clear case for knowledge verification. So with Benner, if you distill that model down, it's essentially saying target training to where that learner actually is if you want to move them from novice to expert and along the stages that we move at. Miller, what this model says is if a person knows it, then build the skill. Don't just stay at knowledge. We want that person to move up. And Kirkpatrick, and I think this is a really sage point, is that if we are investing the huge amounts of time and energy and cost on training, then let's get some better evidence of whether it's working. So with that in mind, knowledge verification, it really just feels like the next step for us. Very logical. All right, I know I'm whizzing through things. That's a bit about the context, the background, huge reform, huge surges in training, and a few of the key educational underpinnings for knowledge verification. I'm now going to walk you through what it actually is, and essentially think of it as a summative assessment tool that verifies existing knowledge. That's it. It's simple. I will refer to it from this moment on as KV as we colloquially and love to call it internally at Ausmed. So knowledge verification, KV, but essentially a summative assessment. Why? Because if we can eliminate unnecessary repeat training, what can we do? We can release that time, we can unlock that hidden capability and actually go on to build it in practice where it really matters. So I want you to kind of take a mental snapshot of this model in practice. If we can't reduce some of that unnecessary repeat training, and we'll go into the details of where it's appropriate, where it's not appropriate, what would you choose? What would we choose to be eligible for knowledge verification? But if we can't reduce that, there's not a finite amount of time that we can allocate towards building capability. So we have to have a way to reduce that so that we can actually unlock that capability. So that's the very simple approach that we want to take here. A little bit about KV in a bit more detail. So think of KV, and you'll see this shortly, as a structured summative pre-assessment that's against defined learning outcomes. And again, you'll see what this assessment looks like soon. But what does it allow? All right, if that learner has their knowledge verified, then that assignment of a module that was eligible and assigned by you is recorded as complete. If there are gaps identified, and what that means is if that learner is unable to complete that assessment to the threshold and the standards that you've set, then they need to go on to complete that full module. And what's also really important in this conversation is that they are able to opt out. So a learner can choose to proceed directly to the module, and that's a really important layer of psychological safety intentionally built into this, so that if an adult staff member, an adult learner, self-identifies that their knowledge is lacking in that particular area, then they can go on to complete that module rather than doing the self-assessment. And you'll note we're very careful here with the terminology and with that language. Now, words really matter. We're not talking about a pass and fail. It's not a test. Be very careful with your language, with how you're framing that. It's a demonstration of existing knowledge, and that's really critical. So I mentioned evaluation earlier on when we were talking about the Kirkpatrick model. I want you to think about knowledge verification as an evaluation tool. And if you think of in those level 1, 2, 3, and 4, where it sits, it's giving you access to new data that you potentially haven't had before. And what that can be framed as is you're moving from only having access to completion data to more robust evidence of comprehension. Not just what my staff have done, but what they now know. So I want you to think about KV as, what is it? It's a structured summative pre-assessment. It's an evaluation data point. It's a tool that verifies existing knowledge, and really critically, it's part of your broader training system. And I will touch on that shortly because that's a really important point. It's not a standalone solution. It's not a shortcut. It's not a mechanism to skip training. It does not replace mandatory training, and it's definitely not a competency assessment tool. And again, we're going to double click on these in a moment. So it's really, really important, as we've done when we've built, we've tested, we've iterated, we've taken knowledge verification to our partner customers, that we've learned, we've engaged with subject matter experts, and really encourage you to frame this well, to be defensible and for this change to be successful. So think about the words, think about how you can describe it, and avoid the items on the right that we would really say are not the best way of framing this. So a couple of key points. This is really critical. Not all modules are eligible for KV, and we have intentionally designed it that way. We have very deliberately taken a proportionate risk-based approach to determining eligibility and created a very strict eligibility criteria to assess if a module is eligible or not. Interestingly, if you kind of want a sense for across the Ausmed library where we sit, we're looking at about 60% eligible, 40% not eligible. So what's not eligible? I'm sure you might be thinking of, what would I not want to use that for? And that's a really important thing to identify before you even do this is what will you not use it for? That will depend on your risk approach, but from our perspective, what we will not make eligible for knowledge verification are the high risk, skills based, or frequently updated content is what's excluded. And that eligibility safeguard, I really want you to think of as a key feature of this product and not a limitation. Eligibility, when we are very clear and confident on eligibility, means that you can have total flexibility. And that's the way we've intended to do it. So key point 1, not everything is eligible. Next key point is that knowledge verification is not a standalone strategy. It doesn't replace all mandatory training. It has to sit within your training system. It's not a silver bullet. It's not the only training strategy you can use. It's part of that plan, implement, and evaluate system that really feeds into that evaluation data that helps you make good training decisions. Where are our gaps? Is the training effective? Where should we direct that time? And it's that feedback loop that we are really excited by, because that's what's going to actually help organizations continuously improve, to prevent that harm, those errors, to be able to respond quickly where those knowledge gaps are identified. If you haven't got a system where this data fits into, then the outcomes of it, you won't get the full potential. So it's not a standalone strategy. Knowledge and competence are not the same thing. I want you to think back to that Miller's model, the pyramid. Knowledge sits at the bottom, and that's where KV sits. KV verifies knowledge. It doesn't assess skill, and it doesn't assess competence. Skill and competence require direct observation and an actual assessment. Knowing it and then being able to do it and to the standard that you expect are two different things. We get a lot of questions from our aged care partners, especially at the moment, around Action 2.96. So it's a specific reference to competency-based education on core matters within the strengthened aged care standards. And it's really important to know that KV and a competency assessment are different. So we need a different approach to assessing knowledge, they know it, versus assessing competence. They can show it and to the standard that we want. They are connected, I will say that, but they are different, and I can't stress that enough. So, the way that they're connected is, of course, under the new standards, you're going to need more time to undertake those competency assessments. So if switching on KV gives you at the minimum the ability to feel more confident in what you're allocating and how you're doing competency-based assessments, that's great. You're going to need the time, that's for sure. Shameless little plug to competency, because we think about everything in its entirety, and working very closely with Grace, one of our other product managers, on building this exceptional product. So a digital competency assessment tool that is able to help you forgo the paper-based assessments and actually assess and evaluate those skills and that competency at scale. And that's coming soon in winter of this year. So stay tuned for that. Last visual before I hand over to our next section, and essentially, think about knowledge verification within our ecosystem. It sits as a really, really beautiful input into Ausmed Learn. It helps identify what staff know so that you can train where the gaps are. Our hope is that it frees up more time so you can target those high value activities, including competency assessment. The more that your system works together, the more powerful each part becomes. All right, looking at the time, I know I'm racing through it. I'm going to hand over to Ben now to walk you through some of the use cases that we heard from you that directly shaped the way that we have built knowledge verification. So welcome, Ben. First webinar of many, I hope.
First webinar, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited to share some of the product development that's gone on with KV.
Fantastic. Should we get straight into it?
Yeah, let's do it. So just to zoom out for a second, KV started, or the idea came about 18 months ago, and that's when we started socializing it with customers, trying to figure out what actually is this thing. So I just want to share with you kind of the 3 benefits that we've refined and honed it down to. The first and kind of the most obvious, or what we led with initially, was the time and cost benefit. I think you all had a situation where staff are frustrated by doing training that they've done 100 times before. But then also there's this real push to minimize costs where possible. So yeah, this essentially boils down to spend less on training that isn't needed. And I thought this quote was really, really hit the nail on the head. So I was talking to a CPO early on in the process, and they said, we flog our staff with training. They're repeating things that they do every day, and we're expecting them to sit through a half-hour module. So this really talks to people that, they're doing hand hygiene well every day, how they're meant to be doing it. And then we're asking them to do a 23 or 24-minute module. Very frustrating, bit of time wasted. The second one was workforce insight. So this emerged a bit later on in the piece, but as we spoke to more people in L&D teams, they spoke a lot about, they have a lot of knowledge of who's completed what, but not how well someone knows a specific topic, especially from online training. So the workforce insight piece of knowledge verification is about seeing what your staff actually know. And I thought this quote really summed it up. An L&D manager said to us, we would rather give an assessment, and if staff have that working knowledge, then we can use that time to build on other skills. So really a point around, all right, if we know what people know, then we can train them most effectively. And the last one I'll just touch on is governance and assurance. So I refer to this as kind of the bedrock of KV. With no governance and assurance underpinnings, it's useless, right? We can minimize the time on training to 0, but if there's no audit defensibility, then it's not that helpful. But the thing that governance and assurance of KV is really focused on is getting comprehension evidence and not just completion records. And that's what we noticed with the strength and aged care standards. So a quality lead was saying to us, the strength and aged care standards actually suggest that we have to demonstrate comprehension. If we can show that someone has knowledge, then why would we put them through hours of training? So KV looks to really give evidence that someone knows something or that they don't know something. So on that, I'll pass back to Zoe, and let's double click on governance and assurance.
Thanks, Ben. Little teaser before we hear a bit more from Ben on the actual demo, but I think a really nice segue into really understanding and appreciating how Ausmed builds products. And this goes to some of the big ticket items that we've created. I mentioned Ausmed competency. Last year it was perform, right through to knowledge verification, what we're talking about here today. And that's that beautiful partnership between us. Ben is an absolute expert in his field as a product manager. We listen, we hear, we want to understand the voice of the customer, and we layer governance all the way through. It's how we build things. It's not an add-on at the end. It's at the core. So I guess, unfortunately, Karen, our Dr. Karen Patterson, our Chief Nursing Officer, isn't here today. She's on a plane on the way back from London, where she presented at a conference about our Know My Rights module. So sadly, she's not with us here today, but her and I have worked very closely with Ben throughout the process to really think about the foundations for using KV safely and effectively. So at the core of everything sits our trusted governance framework, which Karen has done an incredible job on supporting us to implement. Educational integrity, valid assessment principles, and really understanding where our limitations are. And it's really important to flag, I'm not an expert in work health and safety regulation. I have read one of the work health and safety codes, so I feel a little bit more knowledgeable about it now. I do like to read every single regulation that shapes or informs what we do. But we seek expert opinion and work with subject matter experts on the products as well as when we build the content. Just like we would get a medication safety module reviewed by a pharmacist, we seek that expert opinion when we build products as well. So I'm just going to briefly walk through the layers of safeguard built into knowledge verification. And I'm just going to touch on them because I know you're all very eager to see how it actually works. But essentially, strict eligibility criteria. Not every module is eligible, and we take a risk-based approach. So areas like basic life support, not eligible. Medication safety, not eligible. Expert input, which I've mentioned, psychological safety and educational integrity round us out. So these are the layers that we build into it. Through every step of the process, we think about, are our questions, are our assessment processes underpinned by valid principles? You know, why do we align with learning outcomes? Why do we need every question to map to a learning outcome? These are the layers that force us to really think about how we're building this, and are we building it to the highest possible standard.
And from a psychological safety perspective, there's the option that the person can just complete the module. That's also an important thing for people to get, because it is a change. We've got our early adopters, and then we've got those who'll watch and see. So I think having that in place is a really person-centered approach.
So really brief quote from Karen on our podcast, not a shameless plug here for Capability Corner podcast, which I host with Michelle and Karen. And I think that sums it up beautifully, that it's not just psychological safety, but it's that person-centered approach that we really hope shines through, particularly on the learner experience. So while we get Ben up, I'm just going to briefly go through what he'll cover over the next few minutes here. And that's 4 key aspects of KV. First, the manager experience, so what it's like to actually switch on KV. Then he'll walk us through the staff experience, so give us a little insight into what completing a KV looks like. Then we'll show you what the manager outcomes look like. So specifically, it's that dashboard. And then we've got a great KV savings calculator, which we'll walk through, where you can plug in, based on our eligible modules, what you would consider switching on for this, and then calculate the potential cost savings. So Ben, I'll hand it over to you for your demo. Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe. So just as my screen gets pulled up, let me walk you through, as Zoe said, a couple of things. I'll first just show you how we're going to turn it on, then we'll have a look at what your staff will experience, and then I guess the impact insights, where it all just starts to culminate together. But it lives here in your Learn product underneath plan, knowledge verification. You'll be presented with a few different options. Your settings, you'll probably set once and tweak them a little bit, and then it'll be up and running and you won't have to touch them again. But it starts here with your eligible modules. So as Zoe was saying, not everything will get a KV, but when they do have one, it will appear here. You can get a sense for how long the module is, and then how long an assessment might be. You can also see how many staff currently have an outstanding requirement to do this module with your open recs here. And then you may, depending on your own governance policy, decide that some modules are just not eligible for you, and you can just toggle that off. Last thing I'll mention just here is question banks. So one thing we heard really early on in the process was a lot of skepticism around, well, what if I have a KV this year and then I do exactly the same one next year? So, or even if all of your staff, a few of your staff are sitting in the same room and they're all doing the KV together, then they'll just be having the same one. So one feature we introduced to really mitigate that is a question bank. So each learning outcome of a module will have 10 questions attached to it, and then we'll randomly select from those questions every time we give a KV to staff. So if people are sitting in a room together, they all have a different KV. And if people do it 2 years in a row, it'll be a different one as well. Next, we've got the assessment rules. So you can configure KV to how you need it. First is the pass mark. So you can go as low as 80%. And to Zoe's point earlier about governance by design, there's a reason there's not 70 or 60% here. I kind of feel that if it's less than 80%, if a staff member gets less than 80%, it's probably time for them to redo the module. Second one here is assessment questions per learning outcome. We had to figure out how do we make sure that the module gets full coverage? How do we make sure all the key concepts in the module are covered? And the best analog we have for that is the learning outcomes. So if a module like hand hygiene has 4 learning outcomes and you choose standard, then that'll be an 8-question KV. And then you can ramp that all the way up to 4 questions per learning outcome. And the last one here is requiring prior completion. So this one's a bit of a mouthful to explain, but the way to think about it is in terms of induction training. So if you have a new starter at your organization and you don't mind if they do KV straight away, then you can just choose no for this. They can do KV in their induction training. But if you want everyone to go through induction and do the module, then you would just choose yes here. Last section here is who can do knowledge verification. During the pilot process for this, it became really clear that organizations wanted to roll this out either slowly or to only a specific group of people. So that's what this allows you to do. You can scope it in very tightly to a group of people. Let's say you wanted to demo this with your registered nurses at the New South Wales. So you could set your staff scope to the job role of registered nurses and location in New South Wales. Then only people with this job role and in this location would be able to do KV. So yeah, as a very quick run through, these are the settings that you'll have access to. Once you click Save Changes, it'll be live immediately. And this is where the magic starts. So knowledge verification on its own is a product, but then it layers in with your training plans. So once you click Save, then if you have a training plan with dignity of risk in it, and then assignments start going out for that, then the KV will just layer in according to whatever settings you've set. So I'll take a beat there. I'll switch over and let's have a look at what your staff will experience. So now I'm on the staff side in the workforce portal. Nothing in terms of how a staff member would complete training has changed. So let's say I come through and do hand hygiene essentials. I just click Start and then move straight into the module. The only difference here is that a check happens to see if I'm eligible to do KV. If I am, it will show me the intro screen to knowledge verification. Gives me some basic info, tells me how many questions there are, how many attempts I'm allowed, what my pass mark is, and sort of the estimated time. To Zoe's point earlier, there's a skip, or to Karen's point actually, there's a skip for psychological safety. So staff members can forego the opportunity to do KV and just skip. But if I click Start, it puts me straight into the experience. I won't go through the full KV, or maybe I'll whiz through one. But a couple of things to point out here. We've really stripped back the interface here, so it's very focused on the question. We've got a timer because we want to put a little bit of pressure on to, make sure that someone knows it, that they're confident about the answer. If you have to spend 3 or 4 minutes trying to figure out what the answer is, it's probably a good sign that you need to redo the training. Other things here is there's only a forward. Users can only go forward. They can't go back. And that's just so they can't revisit and change their answers if they've gone somewhere else to get the answer, for example. So I'll just whiz through. I'll do what's called a knowledge gap. So if I get to the end here and I've not passed, you can see here I got one question correct. it's now telling me, hey, I think you've got knowledge gaps. It's time to go through and do the module. I can click continue and move on through to do the full module. I can also see where I went wrong, which is really helpful, a really good way to review. If I had have passed, then it would have marked this off for me, and that's all I would have had to do for hand hygiene. So I'll switch back, just working into the last part of this live demo. We've seen the settings, how you set it up. So staff might have gone through now and you want to change some settings about it. If you wanted to come and change how many questions they did, you could come in here and change it and then update, and it would update immediately. But in terms of how do you monitor how well it's doing, you can come and look at this Impact Insights tab here. Couple of things to point out. High-level metrics around time saved. So this aggregates and compares if your staff had have just done knowledge verification or just the module, what's the time saving there? You also get an aggregate pass mark. So obviously not everyone's going to pass knowledge verification, and that's okay. That's just an indication they needed to do the training. But this is the number to watch. If this is really falling low, then it's an indication that training needs to be done in certain areas. And a way to help you really get an understanding for this aggregate number is the learner performance by module section. So you might find, and what we've been seeing with pilot customers on this is that some modules staff are very, very strong with, but others there tends to be knowledge gaps. So what this view allows you to do is you can come in and say, communicating in aged care, I can tell just from this high level that there's been 2 attempts and the average pass rate's been 100%. No one has had an issue with this. And if I click into it, I can see a little bit more. I can see the knowledge area breakdown. So this actually just brings out the learning outcomes, and staff can see, or like your OMs can see how well people did in that knowledge area. Which this starts to become really helpful when there are modules that people aren't doing so well on. You can now start to see, all right, well, for culturally safe, all of these learning outcomes are not being performed very well. So now I can follow this up with further training, whether that be an in-service or some other training. So I'll leave that there. A very quick overview, but I'll just note that all your reporting also updates to include this information. So if you're using the Ausmed payroll report to pay your staff, well, we've included all the knowledge verification time in there, so it will adjust accordingly, as well as your learning records. Last thing I'll just show you here is there's a calculator we built. I think there'll be a link somewhere, but basically you can come in here and just quickly, loosely calculate what your time saving may be. So you just add in your staff number, how many modules you might use from Ausmed, and then what you think the pass rate might be. From what we've seen in the pilot phase, it's between 60 and 70%. So yeah, you can also go to the advanced mode, which has all of our eligible modules. But I'll leave that there. Hopefully that was comprehensive enough. Pass it back to you, Zoe.
Amazing. Absolutely comprehensive, Ben, from a demo perspective, and how you've put so much care, consideration, and so many important things that have gone into KV that I think really give a huge amount of assurance and confidence to organisations that want to embrace that. So thank you. Here's the link to the calculator. If you haven't clicked on it already, I'll just include this for those that watched the recording. Scan the QR code and that'll take you to the eligibility, based on the eligible modules, the time expected that you could save. So really just want to finish up by going through a few of the practical details around rolling KV out into your organisation. So as I'm sure is no surprise after this webinar, we really have taken quite a deliberate low-risk approach to rollout. And I do want to be very transparent about the scope. As I mentioned, not every module is eligible, and that's the way that it's been designed. We've started with really well-established lower risk modules based on the criteria and the risk analysis that we've taken. This will change. The scope will grow over time as we get more and more evaluation data about how this is being used. So right now, we're sitting at just a handful with a huge update due by mid-May that will take the eligible module list to around 50. You can click on the Advanced tab of the calculator and to see what the currently, I think there's about 40 modules there already where you can to see if they're in your training plans or a module that you have in the Ausmed library, if you would deem that eligible, to start to calculate that. I will say, if you do see something in your training plans or in your organization that isn't on this list, feel free to ask. There are definitely some modules not here that will be available, but equally there may be modules that are out of scope for KV. And for our aged care clients in particular, our SIRS is one of them. We've had recent changes to the priority 1 and 2 definitions, which has meant we feel, based on the risk, that new knowledge, that it's not currently eligible to do a knowledge assessment. We feel that there's enough changes in that module that warrant that staff member from completing the actual module. Now, would this be the case every year? Maybe, maybe not. We'll take, again, a proportionate risk-based approach. But when I explain that example, people say, oh, that makes sense. No, I agree. So if you have a question about an eligible module, just reach out to your CS rep or account manager, and we're always happy to provide that rationale as to why it may not be eligible. Couple of key things before you do go live, and we do provide really comprehensive onboarding to KV, but I just plant these 2 seeds for you. One, choose your settings, and we walk through all of this, but think about what your risk appetite is, where you're confident in your training, and where you think, actually, I want that knowledge. I want to know, was it actually effective? For organizations that may use Ausmed Library rather than Ausmed Learn, so you have a separate LMS, the settings that are available in that LMS, obviously outside our control, but this is, you can still use it. Think of it like a module. It's a SCORM package that we send and drop into your learning management system that you're working with. And we're very happy to work with you in those situations to really, maybe give you a test file, see what that capability is like of that non-Ausmed system, and go from there. So please reach out if that applies to your situation. And from an educational but also an audit perspective, I'd really encourage you to really think about, if you're switching on KV, how does it enable, what does it do within the context of your overall training strategy? So we had really, really strong work health and safety and regulatory advice that said this will be more defensible in an audit if it's positioned as part of a training system. You can't just say, when you're asked in an audit, tell us about your training, and you say knowledge verification. You really need to think about what are the processes, the actions, ideally a structured system that's repeatable. It's a cycle, that plan, implement, and evaluate cycle that happens within your organization, and where knowledge verification fits into that as a whole. If you are using KV and you do have an audit, I really encourage you to think about the language. Hopefully you've heard us mention, some of the really important non-negotiables. It's not a test. It's not a way to skip mandatory training. It's not about passing or failing. It's not a competency assessment, and it's not a way to reduce training. Talking about KV with confidence, particularly in an audit, sounds like this. It might be, KV helped us to move away from just having access to completion data. Now we have evidence of comprehension. We've got better understanding of what our staff know and where we need to train. It's allowing us to target training gaps. We know where staff already are, where they're strong. Now we know where their deficits or gaps are, and we're training and building that capability accordingly. And here's how we're thinking about KV within the overall context of our learning and development system. So these are some of the ways to think about and speak about KV, particularly in an audit situation, but to your board, to your colleagues, to your staff. It's really critical that we can speak about this in a way that aligns with those educational design and governance best practices. For those that really do work in that L&D space, just a little diagram to show you that KV sits within that system where you plan education, training, capability strategies, they're implemented, and then they evaluate. So KV helps you plan more effective activities because it gives you evidence on where the gaps are, and it helps you evaluate as well. That's the key areas where it sits in. Okay, we have a few minutes. I'm going to open up the Q&A for us. I did see one from you, Angela. Andrea, where are you? Hang on. I will read a couple out for you. Or maybe that was answered. Hello, Andrea. How are you? I think that the question, if it may or may not have been answered, but yes, a staff member, I would avoid the word skip, and I would frame that as a staff member is able to identify or self-assess where they actually may have gaps and choose to do the full module rather than completing a knowledge verification. Another question is, can OMs, org managers, see the responses from staff, in particular those that didn't pass? Actually, let's bring Ben up. I might throw that one to you, Ben. Just give us a moment. I'll read the question out, Ben. Can OMs see the responses from staff, in particular those that didn't pass?
Yeah, so they can see who passed and who didn't pass. Yeah. So, but in terms of responses, it's at the moment it's aggregated at the learning outcome level. But that'll be something we work on in the next few months is way to drill down even further.
Beautiful. Does each person have to complete the module at least once before KV can be applied? That setting is up to you, and that's that toggle on of eligible. Hang on, what's the wording? It was us that said it, Ben. What was it?
Prior completion. Yeah, there's a toggle in there for if you want to allow people to have no learning record existing and do a KV, you can choose that, or you can require what we're calling prior completion.
Yeah, so we're sorry, it's a mouthful, but it's a really important setting because it gives you the option of within your risk appetite and how you want to apply this, what that option is. Okay, I think that might be all of the questions that have come through.
I think maybe there was one other from Renee. I'll just answer it. It was, can you drill down to teams or locations when looking at the insights? At the moment in this first version, we can't quite do that, but that is the plan for this, to be able to get those sort of trend insights across different groups.
Yeah. Can the pass mark vary from module to module? No, the settings are global, aren't they, Ben, at this stage?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Do we have an ability to run a report on who has decided to skip the KV? No. Is that yes?
Not at the moment, but yeah, the few things on the way, and that's part of it, a KV-specific report.
Fantastic. And I might end with one final question. When will this be available? Trish, the good news, it is available currently with a small handful of modules that you can that we can walk you through switching on with those that number reaching about 40 to 50 by mid-May. I'll move to the next slide in a moment. Just to show you where you can go to get more information. For those of you that are using Ausmed that were already in you've got a relationship with either your customer success or account manager, please reach out to your account manager who can assist you to enable KV to be switched on. It is included within the the Ausmed license that you already have, and we can work with you to switch that on, to onboard you, and to walk you through the details. And I think this is probably the best place to end, is another QR code. Scan that for the calculator, eligibility modules, and we can absolutely work with you to enable this within your organisation. So just want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Really great to be able to walk you through what KV is, why we've built it, how we've built it, to give you the demo, and we look forward to working with as many of you as possible to support your organisations to also introduce KV. And Ben, thank you so much. First demo. I think and hope we're going to be seeing a lot more of you on our webinars.
Thanks so much, Zoe, and thanks everyone for being here.
Wonderful. Thanks again, and see you all very soon.